Well, there is a time and a place to disobey governmental orders. 3 days ago, we celebrated the 244th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. A group of men took it upon themselves to declare that a separation existed between England and the 13 colonies. They did not claim that mankind had a right to disobey a political order because of an injustice. They declared that it was through God that they had the responsibility to do so. Well, if you're joining us in going through this reading plan through the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, today's reading is Ezra 4, verse 17 through 5:5, and I encourage you to read that passage. Well, Ezra 5, 1 through 2 says this: When the prophets Haggai and the prophet Zechariah prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them, then Zerubbabel and Jeshua arose, and they began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were all with them, supporting them. Yesterday, we looked at the political intrigue that caused the temple work to be questioned. King Artaxerxes gave the order and the work was forcibly stopped. It did not restart until a new king, Darius, came on board scene, and Haggai and Zechariah told them to begin work again. The problem was that when they said this, the order had not yet been countered by the government. Now, when an order from a government counters an order from God, does a Christian obey God or the law from the government? Now, this question has present-day implications, and some in the Christian community are choosing to disobey the governmental orders, and while others are following them. Who is right and who is wrong? We need to look at the history of the time and discover a principle that we can use to help out in our own lives. The Jews had the right to rebuild the temple. They had been given that right by a decree from Cyrus. The Jews were right to cease building the temple when the governments changed and a new government or new king came to power. The Jews were right to restart and rebuild when Haggai prophesied about the directive from God. Where they failed was they did not seek an answer from God when the first stop order was given. Now, I realize that I'm arguing from silence, but the verb ceased in Ezra 4:24 is written in such a way as to indicate an immediate event. It would seem that they did not put up much of an argument because Haggai, through God, chides them by asking if it was proper for them to live in comfort while God's house is desolate, Haggai 1:4. They cared more about themselves than following a mandate from God. Now, work immediately restarted when they realized their error, and they were looking out for themselves rather than God. Now, that brings us to today. Where do we draw the line in obeying governments during these days? Now, the answer lies in the principle. Can we worship God without physically or being under a physical restriction in being our church building? Yes, we can. Are we disregarding Hebrews 10:25 when it tells us not to forsake the gathering of one another? No, we don't. In these days of technology, we can gather and worship together. It's not the same, and it is probably inferior, but through the magic of Zoom and FaceTime and YouTube and other programs, we can fellowship, pray, and worship together. We can do this without disobeying the governmental order, or God for that matter. Is it pleasant? No, it's not. But it is functional, and until we receive a direct word from God, we are to obey the government in this case.